and it's just condensed into the most action-packed, coolest scenes. So if you always want the real information how things were, this is what this channel is for. It's NOVRITSCH Backstage, where I really share the real experience of airsofting, of certain equipment and so on. Hey, what's up guys? In this video I would like to talk about my experience with thermal optics in airsoft, and this video is gonna be quite different to what you might have seen on YouTube, you know, with many people comparing €1,000 thermal optics and, you know, all kinds of fancy stuff, how they use it for hunting and all of this. This one is really for the airsoft players, yeah? How can they use thermal in a useful way for airsoft during the day actually also, yeah, not just at night. How do I mount it? What do I need to take care of? How do I protect it from BBs? What are the advantages, disadvantages, different models on a budget? Because I know there's many cool €5,000 thermals out there, but who is really gonna pay for that? So in this video, we're really only talking budget thermals, meaning, you know, $500-ish. I'm also traveling right now. I'm not in a studio. I hope this whole camera setup and the audio kind of works. I don't have great lights. Yeah, I don't even have the thermals themselves with me, but I will just bring everything up on the screen to kind of share my experience that I gathered. I always wanted to have a thermal and always really liked the idea, but previously, you know, 5 years ago, these weren't really affordable, yeah? They started at maybe $2,000, $3,000, and it was not really an option to get them, yeah? I was always worried that they break and so on. But things have changed, and I did tons of research and I found a few thermals that are spec-wise. I'm not gonna, you know, get too much into specs. I don't think that's what you guys came here for. But on a spec level, they were good enough to spot people at, you know, like 100 meters. So 2 optics I tested, which was the Virgo S2. That's this one right here. That's the one that I am running in the SG11 thermal gameplay. You can see it right here, basically mounted on the side of my scope. And then I also ran the TE211M from Guide. This one was even cheaper. Yeah, that's a sub €500 or sub 500. I think in the US they're like 600 or something like this. So they are kind of affordable, yeah, not too crazy. So these are the ones that I tested. These were the best contenders. My result, really quickly on a performance level, is that honestly, I think the cheaper version, so the TE211M, was my, you know, personal favorite. It is first of all a little bit cheaper. Also, it has the option of operating the menu without using the touch screen, yeah, because you can. It has this ring right here. This one, you can basically turn this ring and then confirm with this button on top. You can confirm your selection, while the Virgo S2 is purely operated through the touch screen, and that means it's a little bit harder to make it BB proof. You couldn't just put you know, like a thick piece of glass in front of it, because then you cannot operate the touch screen anymore, and then you're losing some functionality like adjusting the sensitivity of the thermal and all of this, which you eventually need depending on temperature change. So yeah, the TE211 is a little bit longer. Yeah, it's a little bit longer, it's a little bit heavier, but on a functionality level, they are, for me, identical. And this is why my personal favorite was the TE211M. Now, all thermal optics are not BB proof. Yeah? This is something that you have to be aware of, and there's a good reason. If you put a lens in front, not a lens, but a protection glass like polycarbonate or something, if you put that in front of the sensor, it won't work anymore. The infrared radiation gets blocked with that protection layer. So the only way that we found to make these things BB proof is by adding a kill flash in front. So this is also what we've done. We are offering this thing now with a kill flash in front, which means that if a BB hits, you know, wants to hit the sensor, if it's going in that direction, it's going to be blocked by the kill flash, and you can simply just exchange the kill flash to keep it running. Because again, if you get shot into the lens on a €500 thermal optic, you're gonna have a bad day. So I think it's really important that you're aware of this. You can, if you don't have the specific one, you can, you know, get a different thermal optic. You can glue a kill flash in front of it. There's many ways that you can do this. We just made a custom mount, so it's a bit more elegant. Why did I only look at these two? Now, when it comes to thermal optics, there's many different kinds of them, and I think we can break them down to helmet mounted. So, it's on your helmet mount, you just flip it down like a night vision. Then you have monoculars, which is the same as these two. They're basically handheld, they have some screw interfaces so you can mount them to guns. Careful with that though, there's some legal limitations, we're gonna get into that later. So yeah, helmet mounted, the monoculars, and then we also have gun mounted in a way that you mount it on a Picatinny and then you use it as your actual optic. Now immediately the one that mounts onto the gun as an optic and that you would use this as your primary optic, I think it's a terrible idea in airsoft, and it totally works in hunting, right? You can zero it in and you have lots of time when you're at night, you see an animal coming up, you have lots of time to aim at it, it doesn't know that you're there, you take your shot and all of this. So at least this is how hunting in Austria works. I know people also hunt out of helicopters and all of this, but I think for most hunters they have plenty of time to direct their optic onto the animal and then take the shot, right? They also don't have to track their BB. So these are really the two reasons why in this price class I would never use these things as my primary optic. Yeah, they are capable of it. You can have a crosshair on them and you can even adjust the position of the crosshair on them. But you lose two extremely important functions in airsoft, which other cheap optics provide, any red dot or any scope, which is BB tracking. Yeah, you can track your BB. You will never be able to track your BB on a screen like this. So that for me is absolute no-go. I need to know where my BB is going, because how else am I gonna correct for wind and misbehavior of my gun or whatnot. Then the second big reason why I would never do it is speed. Not just speed, but looking at a screen, you have a certain delay, and also when there's light on the screen, maybe it's bright sunlight, you will not see anything. Yeah, there's just situations where you don't want to be looking at the screen when you're aiming. Especially when you go into CQB, imagine you don't have your red dot anymore. You have to rely on this thermal optic to see someone coming around the corner and to, direct your gun at that thread. So that for me is an absolute no-go. I would never do that and I don't recommend it. On the helmet version, I do think the helmet one is feasible. You could totally mount this onto a helmet mount. What I didn't really like about that idea is with the quality of these thermals, and I think you can see it very well here, this is an actual situation here on SSG 11 with the Virgo 2. The target is about, I would say, 40 meters away, and all you can see on the screen is actually this here. Ignore this little green corner here. This is actually the selfie cam. The selfie cam has, it is warm, so you can see it right here. But this is the target, right? It's only a few pixels and you don't really see the environment, right? So even though you would see it on, on your monocular that there is someone, you wouldn't know exactly where he is, right? Because you don't have any reference here. You don't see the corner of a building. You don't really see any trees or anything like this. You only see this dot. And here's the beauty of having this mounted right next to your optic. You can basically have this aligned with your scope, and you bring this green dot that you have here in your thermal optic, you bring this into the middle of your thermal optic, and now you switch into your scope, into your red dot, and wherever your crosshair is, if you align them, then you know exactly here's where the target is. And you couldn't do this with a helmet. You would just kind of have to guess where the guy is, right? And I just don't find that very appealing. This is why I didn't even bother mounting it to my helmet. So this was my preferred solution, is not using it as my aiming device and not using it on a helmet with a flip down. The next thing is also you have to flip it down on a helmet. That takes time. You have to flip it up again. I don't know, just not for me. If I have it on my replica, it's always on me. I can always bring it up and scan really quick without having to, break my grip from the gun. I always am in full control. I can shoot anytime, and it's just kind of there. And I can just bring it up, scan the environment. Oh, I see a green dot, just like here. And I bring my head into the, I align my eye with my optic and I can take my shot. Good, so this is why I went with a simple monocular option, and I did mount it on the side of my scope. When it comes to mounting, we're gonna get later into it, what I believe is important, but now we can move on to the next point, which is usefulness of these things in an actual game. Because very often, in your head, you will think, wow, you have all of these advantages, and I'm sure you have had this before. There's all of these glorious ideas in Airsoft, like Airsoft claymores and mines and communication systems that sound incredible, but then you actually use them and they're not useful. This is one of the things where I have to say it is actually useful under certain circumstances. Now, I've been using it in the last gameplay, and you can see it there. I'm using it in winter, meaning that the entire environment is cold and the player is warm, obviously, right? The player is 36 degrees, the environment was around +5. So there was a massive heat difference between the player and the environment, which is again why right here I can clearly see that player as a green dot while everything else is blue. There's no way that you're not gonna see this while you're doing your spotting in the field. Now, I did also experience that this is, even in winter, this is not always the case. It can be that the sun is shining, you know, maybe it is still 5 degrees, but once the sun is shining, certain objects can heat up. Like I had one situation where there was a stack of black tires, and because they're black and they absorb a lot of sunlight and a lot of energy, when I touched them with my hand, I think they were just about as warm as, you know, as me, like about between 30 and 40 degrees. And this really throws you off, because you then start scanning through the environment and there's just many objects which light up as much as any of the players, right? So this is something you have to be aware of. If it's really sunny out, certain objects will be just as warm as the players, and you will see them as good as the players, which can distract you. And it was not the case for the majority of this game, because it was really cloudy. It opened up once, and that's where I saw this behavior. So yeah, be aware of this. And also, you know, once it's summer, if it's 36 degrees outside, you will also not see any heat difference anymore, right? You will just not be able to see that. So the closer the gap is between the environment temperature and the player, the less you're gonna see it. So be aware of it. I think in summer, this will not be as useful anymore as it is in winter. In the night, I think it's gonna be absolutely useful, because at night everything cools down. You don't have the sun heating up certain spots anymore, so everything should have about the same temperature. And I mean, depending where you live, but at night it should, you know, go below 25 degrees at least. So you will have that heat difference to actual players. But yeah, in winter, for me, this becomes an absolute no-brainer. And every winter game, when there is woodland involved, where people can camouflage and hide behind bushes and all of this, I will absolutely be running a Thermal Optic. Because honestly, I mean, of course you have to pay for it, right? You have to finance it, but once you have it, why not use it? It's not really in the way. I'm running my rifle just how I run it usually. I aim with it, I shoot with it, I see my BB trajectory. It's not super heavy, it's not really in the way. Might as well run it, right? One thing you have to be careful with is all the content on the main channel, because it's made purely for entertainment. It doesn't really reflect what's happening at the game, because this is a, what, I think 13-minute video, and I have probably 35 kills in it. Of course, that didn't happen in these 13 minutes, right? This was a much longer game day. It was like a couple hours, and it's just condensed into the most action-packed, coolest scenes, which is what gameplays are, really. Yeah. So if you always want the real information how things were, this is what this channel is for. It's NOVRITSCH Backstage, where I really share the real experience of airsofting, of certain equipment and so on. So yeah, that being said, it's not just that the video is misleading on how the experience was of the game day, but also the thermal camera footage that you will see in the gameplay is extremely zoomed in. Yeah, sometimes you see them full screen, you know, the person, you can even make out the arm and all of this, but this was not possible during the game. In the game, it's really just a tiny dot on the thermal optic, which is enough that you spot the person, but you couldn't make out details, right? We just zoomed in massively on that footage. Also, the thermal camera stopped recording at some point. I think I forgot to press the button or something like this. And to make up for the missing footage, I did basically ask a guy to go behind the bush, and I just, you know, recorded some random footage. And then I gave that to the editor, and he put that into the gameplay. So not even all thermal footage actually happened during the game. So just be aware of this. It's not gonna be these big visible enemies on screen. This is a real example. Yeah, you see the ghillie player being, that's about 10 meters away. You know, it's not really far, and he covers about here half the screen, as you can see. You know, at this distance you would see this guy anyways. So at realistic distances of 40, 50, 60 meters, it is really just a tiny dot on the screen. I would like to talk next about where to position this thing on your replica, and I had two different gameplays and two different mounting positions. One was on the 249, so this is that optic here, the TE211M, mounted on the front of the SSR 249. And here you have to imagine that this tiny screen, if that is too far away from you, it becomes really small, right? So I enjoyed the way of mounting much more on the SSG11, where, you know, when I lean into the scope, it's right there. It's literally in front of me. It's even almost covering my view. That's what you want on these, because again, the screen is small, so you want to make the most out of it. Bring it as close as possible to your face, that when you bring your gun up, that it's right there and you can really make out even, like, I mean, not single pixels, but you get the idea. It should be close to you. I think it would be okay to have it on top of your optic as well. I believe that would be an okay option. Yeah, but don't mount it too far forward. Don't mount it as your optic. Also, don't mount it on the right side of your optic if you shoulder on the right side, because then your scope is going to be in the way. Just mount it in a way that when you bring up your gun, that it's right in front of you. Because the way you use it in a game is really, you know, you walk around, you see a bush, and you want to know, hey, is there someone? Rather than, you know, squeezing your eyes and trying to figure out if you see movement, you literally just bring up your replica, you go from left to right, green dot. Okay, you go into your optic and you pull the trigger. That's the beauty of it. So also, when it comes to what kind of replica to use, I actually think the best replica to use these things would be a really light one. Something like this is a 9DSG, I think could be a good contender, because it's a really light replica. You can bring it up all the time, just do your observations. And if there's someone behind the bush, you can switch to full auto and, you know, go through most dense bushes and so on. Because honestly, if there's no forest, if there's no camouflage aspect in a game, you know, if it's like a CQB game or a pure urban game, I don't even know if the thermal optic would be that useful, because you kind of make the people out with your eyes anyways. The one exception might be when someone is hiding in a dark room. That happens quite often in Airsoft. You have a roof and then it gets really dark in that room. Some sniper or some enemy player can be hiding in there and you won't be able to see him. You will be able to see him with this thing, so that might be the one exception where thermals are still very useful, even though there's no woodland environment. Here in this video I want to show you the TE211M optic mounted on the 249, so you can kind of get an idea. You see, this is where the guy is, maybe again 50 meters away. That's how big he appears in your thermal, that's how visible he is. Now he will run over here behind these bushes, and you can still see, you know, that he is visible. It's just these flashes of yellow coming up. So this is really the advantage then when someone is covered, you know, with dense bush, you can still see that person. Final point is buying these optics. There's multiple ways on how to get these. There's multiple retailers carrying them. You can also get them on AliExpress. You can import them directly from China. There's one thing where you have to be careful though, and that's the whole legal situation about these things. Some of these thermal optics, even though they don't say it on AliExpress that they come with a gun mount, they actually come with a gun mount. And in some countries, this can get you into real trouble. If it's a gun mounted night aiming device, it becomes a regulated item and it can get into trouble. So be really, really careful what you're doing here. You don't wanna, you know, just don't get yourself in trouble. Do your research, really make sure that the gun mount is not included, and double and triple check. Because some of these websites don't show the gun mount because they are aware that this is a sensitive item then, in China especially. But then when it comes to customs, to your border basically, and to the customs officer, that little piece is actually included, and that could get into trouble. So be careful with that stuff, and if you get a thermal optic from a different website than ours, then make sure you protect it with a kill flash. You don't want to have a BB destroying your lens, because especially if you got it from China, you will not be able to replace it. You know, it's basically trash and you can throw it away. So protect that thing, put a kill flash in front. And also here you have to be careful. Different kill flashes have different effects. If you have a very fine one, like the one we have on our 124 times LPVO, the 100 euro one, this one is too fine actually. The grid is too fine and the thermal optic really loses sensitivity. You need a big wide open kill flash that's of course still small enough that a BB cannot pass, but the hose must be big enough to not block the basically the information, the light coming into the lens. Then when it comes to mounting, you also have to be extremely careful. Just because you could import or get the optic into your country doesn't mean that you can mount it to a gun. If you mount it to a gun, inform yourself first. Just first do the research, then mount it to your gun. Because if it's once you mount it on a gun and you're in the wrong place and you get caught, this can get you into massive trouble. This can again be actually a regulated item, especially because these all of these actually have the function of putting a crosshair as an overlay. So they can be used as an aiming device at night, and yeah, again, that can make it a regulated item depending on where you live. I will not go into how I mounted mine because I don't want to be part of the trouble that you might get into. But all I can say is that all of these come with screw mounting interfaces, and you know, there's always ways of how to mount something to a replica. But I'm not going to give you any instructions on it. I'm losing my voice already. I got a little sick, unfortunately, while traveling. But I still really wanted to make this video because there's G11 thermal gameplays out now. Go check it out if you haven't seen it yet. And I wanted to just share my experience on that. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.